All right, Brett Puffenbarger, welcome to the show. For people who don't know you yet, you are the co-founder and CEO of Good Highdeas and Project Mongoose. You see the cannabis industry is really being broken in a lot of ways, and I wonder if you could unpack that a little bit, what you mean by broken and what you've seen out there.
So I guess the start of it is that I think we are broken culturally. I mean, I kind of touched on it a little bit ago, the massive number of turnover. But if we start marrying that number with recent reports that most of the cannabis giants in Canada have excesses of 1 billion milligrams of THC, you start marrying that to the fact that most of the major large corporate MSOs have increased CEO pay and stuff and increased compensation packages while cutting members of the team, it kind of starts painting a pretty damning picture of what's actually going on. So if you take all of that and then you kind of overlay it with the mainstream news about it, so it looks like what we've done is created an industry that is designed to get bought out by pharmaceuticals and consumer packaged goods. But in actuality, what we've done is watched a whole lot of people build an industry based on oil and mining futures and then create it and continue to kind of limp it along using stock trading techniques and merger and acquisition maneuvering and this basic kind of thing where now we're at a point where, I don't know how to say it any other way, there is a certain class of people who think they created the cannabis industry and are now at a level of arrogance where they literally throw it in our faces that they don't care, they're only in it for themselves, and then they just put a pretty lipstick on it and say, oh, we're here for social equity and we're helping fight for legalization, but it doesn't take into account what legalization really means. You know what I mean? There's 50 bazillion different definitions of what legal means. Do you mean legal forced vertical integration with regulatory capture and huge barriers to entry? Or do you mean horizontal licensing with home grow provisions? When you say social equity and equality, what do you mean? Do you mean that we're going to give preferential treatment? Do you mean that we're going to encourage a certain class of people to participate? Or are we going to actually put in some protections? And I guess where I'm going with this whole thing is that I think it's broken, and I think it's broken on purpose. And I think there's a whole lot of excuses thrown out there for why it's not broken. And I don't think any of them hold water. You know what I mean? I was recently quoted in a thing where they said, this fake character I made up was a bit of a straw man. But I would argue that the other side of that is actually the straw man. We're pushing for vertical integration because it's for the patients. Well, no, it's not. And we can look at data in every state that has forced vertical integration that it actually hurts. Oh, we don't want home grow because it's about quality control. Actually, that doesn't really hold water either. If we actually look at test results from large batches of community cultivated stuff, it's just as good, if not better. And I think that kind of continues on through the whole thing. So for me, I think the key point for all of this is that they set this up on a system that doesn't actually mimic what we're doing. And they have continued to create a predatory and vicious class that is resulting in two things. It's chewing up really talented people, and it's preventing other talented people from coming in. Or if it's not, they're coming in and getting chewed up. And I don't think it's sustainable. And I think they've used it all as this kind of overlying thing of like, well, we're just getting prepared for consumer packaged goods and pharmaceutical companies, the Procter and Gambles of the world, the Coca-Colas of the world, the Johnson and Johnsons of the world. They're going to come in and buy us. I think they're wrong. I feel a little bit like Chicken Little, but why? Why would Coca-Cola come in and buy a Canopy Growth Corporation or a Tilray or a Hexo when they could buy a smaller company with stronger IP protections and do what they do best? Scale it. They don't want an already scaled failing giant. They want a medium-sized company they can scale into what they want.
A lot of these companies are chewing people up. We're talking about the people who get into cannabis with good intentions. They want to add value. They want to be a part of this industry. And then they run into these toxic workplaces, which I think are obviously a trickle down effect from the careless leadership, either people who aren't qualified to manage people or just don't care enough to make sure it's done right. I think that in of itself is a whole conversation. And then you have all the other impacts that we could analyze that these attitudes are having on the industry and the people the industry is designed to serve.
My favorite part to go there is the Dunning-Kruger effect, man. I think what we have is a whole bunch of people with a limited understanding of the actual market projecting as if they are experts. And what they've done is they're all living with a full realization that that's what they're doing. So they create toxic work cultures and exclusivity things, and they basically take all of the people who actually know what they're doing and they keep them at a lower level, and they just suck them dry for information. They suck them dry for their resources, their networks, their things, and then they kick them off to the curb. And they look for the wrong things when they're hiring people. It's this whole thing where, like, I think there is this forever problem of they're hiring the wrong people for middle management through director level. And then those people are creating a barrier. So for me, I think part of it is the C-suite, the true top of the heap, set things up a little broken. I think some of them did it on purpose. I think some of them did it without even realizing they were doing it. But what it's created is this toxic culture right there in the middle where they're preventing innovation, they're preventing growth for the company. They're doing things that quite literally shoot the company in the foot for a single person's gain, if that makes sense. And that's something I've experienced personally in jobs. And it's something like, so the whole idea behind this came from, I don't have any friends outside of cannabis anymore. Almost everyone I talk to in any way, shape, or form is in the cannabis industry. And it was becoming a thing where it almost became the open secret of the industry. You know what I mean? Like the water cooler talk is like, what's going on at the top? What is happening up there? Why can't we get this or that? And it's sad because we could be a destination industry. You know what I mean? We could be a lot more than we are. And I think we're hurting ourselves as an industry by continuing down this path of toxic middle management pushing down. And I don't know what the answer is outside of having a true respect for the plant and realizing that we are at our core an industry that was built on advocacy and created through activism, and only through remembering those two kind of cultural tenets can we carry on. You know what I mean? Like, and I have no issue with profit. I have no issue with massive corporations. My thing is that a lot of them are doing it in a way that doesn't actually give us an accurate portrayal. So if you go into a state like here in Florida with forced vertical integration, full regulatory capture, I don't think most of those companies would do that well with real competition because they have no incentive to do it. They can put out whatever they want and people are going to buy it because it's all they have. And that's a problem. We have two competing industries within our industry. We have the heart and the head, right? Every industry has it. Where's the heart of the industry and where's the head of the industry? And we have two competing industries that funnel those. We have the legacy market. We have kind of the bro dude West Coast guys that look like me. You know what I mean? Upturned hat and sleeve tattoos and bong rips and you know, I'm not afraid to go talk to a cartel member about our recent bud shipment. And then you have the other side of it. You have kind of the buttoned up boat shoes, suit and tie kind of guy that I call them Chads, but that's not necessarily the most, it's a little derogatory, I guess, but we kind of have these two things. And those two groups, to me, both have a home in cannabis. I think both of them can and are good for cannabis. I think a lot of what the Chad side of the equation is doing is bad for it, but I don't think in and of itself it is inherently bad. So what we end up having is like the heart should be coming from the legacy market. You know what I mean? It should be driving this love for the plant, this sacred understanding, this whole whatever. Bob Marley said it best: the herb is the healing of the nations, right? And on the other side of that, we should have these corporate guys creating the brain of it. How can we help the legacy market take their brand and bring it to the masses? But what we actually have is kind of the opposite. We've given the heartstrings to the guys who know exactly what they're doing in business, and they choose to make it all about margins and regulatory capture and not about actual product quality or any of these other things. The other side of that, we have the legacy guys who are now crushing it and growing by leaps and bounds, but that whole other side of the equation is one step ahead of them with regulations and requirements and kind of stamping them down at every turn. And to me, the only answer, I'll preach this to the heavens forever, the only possible answer is if we can somehow ensure that home grow makes it into every next move we make, whether it's state level legalization or eventual federal legalization. Without home grow, we are doomed to failure as an industry. And not just doomed from the patient perspective. I think it would be really easy for people to assume I'm just this patient advocate working on behalf of those. But no, I'm looking out for the investors too. You know what I mean? Like there's been this kind of ongoing idea for the last year until the last month or so that capital dried up in cannabis. It didn't. Capital sat back and watched that you burned the first couple $1 billion pumped in the industry on buying jets and massive CEO pay things and blowing it on crazy stuff like LPP. And then you end up with this, you know what I mean? So I think it's both. Not only are we burning patients right now as an industry, we're burning the investors who are trying to just make money. So even the predatory class, even the venture capital of the world is getting burned. And it's both sides of the equation. And I think that to me is the biggest problem. I could accept if we were moving into a very regulated world. Look at Pabst Blue Ribbon and their recent release of THC seltzer. Hell yeah. If PBR was the only cannabis brand in my area and they were kicking ass using what they do to make quality products, sure. But we're not getting that. Both sides of this equation are getting burned every single time. And to me, that's the biggest travesty. Neither side is happy. Not the Wall Street side and not the patient side. What we have seen and kind of the idea that we've come up with is that new investors into the cannabis space are used to a certain level of due diligence, vetting, public relations issues, the like. But what we're finding is that for some reason, the hype of the green rush, the hockey stick projections of the pitch decks, the excitement of everything that's going on has put blinders on otherwise brilliant business people. And they just wholeheartedly believe the hype because here's my favorite. Oh man, I'm going into Alex Jones territory and it's okay. The data that is being used to support most of the cannabis industry, in my opinion, is flawed from the start. So in any other industry, nearly any other industry, I'm sure there's a few niche, very small, weird things that I don't know about, but any major industry, we have two things that we don't have in cannabis. We have the US Department of Labor here in the United States, and we have the Small Business Administration. those two things monitor employment levels. They monitor total size of the industry. They monitor a lot of things we don't have the ability to monitor because it's all Schedule 1. So what we as the cannabis industry have done is created a litany of data companies, and we could name a bunch of them. It doesn't really matter. The problem is that all of them are funded by the same funds that fund the cannabis companies themselves. That's a problem. Because now, what other answer would they have but to give positive projections of growth for the industry? Because in order for them to get money, the companies they're supporting have to get money. It's exactly what I was getting at with the whole, their stock trading. We're not actually growing an industry. We're growing an industry on top of an industry, if that makes sense. Like, you ever seen that movie, The Big Short? About the real estate
Yes,
boom?
I saw it. Yes, saw it one time.
So they go in and they meet with this guy, and he talks about this whole thing. He's like, whoa, we created synthetic CDOs. And what that is they were betting on people betting on people betting on people betting on the housing market. So a $10,000 deal, for example, could become $1 million economy of bets, cross bets, hedges. You get where I'm going with that, right? The entire global cannabis industry, in my opinion, is set up in a very similar way. And a really great example to kind of illustrate that would be the recent purchase of Bluma Pharmaceuticals, aka One Plant, again, here in my home state of Florida. Just as an aside, I only use Florida because we are the roadmap of how all of this stuff is broken, not because I live here. You can also see it in other states. It just happens to be that I live in the state that is most broken. So back to the Bluma Pharmaceutical purchase. Here in Florida, we have a website called Know the Facts MMJ that gives us monthly updates on basically everything the current licensed producers in Florida are doing, right? So like we have 22 licenses, but I can tell you only 11 are actually producing because the other 11 have 0 dispensed milligrams, right? So they're not doing anything despite having a license. Out of those 11, Bluma Pharmaceuticals, by the last update, was dispensing approximately 1 million milligrams of THC a month. They had 7 retail locations and something like 50,000 square feet under canopy growing, right? Huge operation by any other terms. Outside of Florida, that's $50-60 million max. Here in Florida, they just got bought for $213 million. But I can go and look at a company like Trulieve, who's also here. They have 62 million milligrams of THC a month dispensed. They have 72 locations. So they're 62 times the amount of sales in 10 times the amount of locations. I don't know how big their grow facility is, but the last numbers I was reading is hundreds of thousands of square feet. So I'm no math guy. I am not a CFO. I am not an MBA or a CPA or anything like that. But when I look at that, so you're telling me a company with 62 times the amount of sales and 10 times the amount of stuff. And if I go online right now and I look up their valuation, they're at $500 million. So they're only double the price for 62 times the amount of sales. Yeah. Just,
well, we couldn't do 62 times the price. I mean,
right. It would be astronomical. But my thing is those don't add up. I'm not suggesting that one is over or undervalued. I'm not suggesting which way that's broken. But just the fact that that's how it lays out is broken. I mean, you can even look at it where 2 years ago, a license with 0 infrastructure attached to it sold for $53 million just for a piece of paper, just to say you could. And as far as I know, that company is still at 0 milligrams a month dispensed 2 years and some change later. But the value of the license has probably gone up.